The CEO is a very unique animal. It's an animal that hunts, thinks, sleeps, and lives differently from all other species. It has its own language and its own instincts. It eats last and has worries that no one else has. The CEO has thoughts it can't express to its employees, to its friends, and to its spouse. It's an animal unlike any other animal. I'm Alex Gertzberg, and this is CEO Confidential, where we learn about this rare breed, one heartbreak, one victory, one story at a time. This show is sponsored by the law firm of Gertzberg Licata, your ally for business growth. How are you, my man?
Good. How are you?
Good. Thanks for doing this. Still a good time?
Yep.
Awesome.
Good to go.
Awesome. Lee Stacey, insurance guru, former U.S. Army Ranger, although one might argue that you're never really former once you're an Army Ranger, right? You're an Army Ranger
Yeah.
for
There's
life.
something to be said for that, for sure.
Yeah. Tell us about that time that you hired that one employee and things just didn't work out the way you thought they would.
I've told this story several times, and it's absolutely all true. And it's one of those situations where truth is stranger than fiction. You know, you hear people say you just can't make that up. And so in my business, I a big part of what I do is recruit and hire people. And if you hire all the right people and put the right butts in the right seats, the business takes care of itself. If you go through the process of exercising diligence. And the at the time I was working for a public company, and I was tasked with staffing the office appropriately. We had about 90 people in the office, and I had we needed salespeople. So hire this guy, bring him on board, and things aren't going real well. And I'm starting to get a gut feeling that maybe there's something amiss. So normally what I do is I just I'll reach out to the guy and say, hey, how are things going? Are you settling in okay? Do you have any questions about the insurance companies we represent, the various fee agreement arrangements that we arrive at with our client firms? How can I help you to be successful? He goes, oh no, things are going good. We're just I'm new and I need to get some traction, and I need to get a couple wins under my belt, and completely understandable explanation. So another couple months go by. This guy still isn't getting any traction. So I ask his team, and I say, hey, how's this guy doing? And they just kind of look at me and shrug, and they're like, wow, I really don't know. You're the boss. You tell me, And I said, well, what if he's out there and he's getting opportunities for us? He's obviously got you involved with, and they're like, no, not really seeing a ton of activity from him. And so my antenna go up, I'm like, well, gosh, I wonder what he's doing wrong. Well, you know me, Alex, I'm very face value. What you see is what you get. There's no hidden agenda with me whatsoever.
Right.
So I go to the guy and I say, hey, how can I help you? We want to make sure that you're successful here. What is that going to take? And again, he kind of punts me. No, it's good. It's good. I know what I'm doing. I've been doing this for a while. It's just going to take some, time to hit a rhythm. And so, let's say another month goes by, and same zero inertia. And I start kind of like keeping track of, is he here? Is he in the office? Is he not in the office? Is he showing up early? Is he working half a day and then going out and making sales calls? What's he doing exactly? And as he's doing this, I'm thinking, all right, you know what? I'm going to kind of force myself into his world here to see things, and kind of like, saddle up next to him and say, what is it that you're doing? You could be doing differently, in my opinion. And I ended up doing two things. I thought, okay, first of all, I'm going to check this guy out and see, is he actually calling companies? Is he, what is his outgoing call volume? Is he initiating cold calls? Is he initiating warm calls or referrals? So I called up my corporate IT people, and they were in Indianapolis at the time. And I said, hey, I need a phone dump on this extension. I felt kind of like it was an episode of Law and Order or something, I said,
Right.
and they said a phone dump. Yeah, okay, listen, we're going to give you our standard phone dump is 180-day look back, and we're going to do 3 different reports, and the reports are sorted by um, chronological order of outgoing calls, chronological order of incoming calls, and then a list of outgoing calls sorted not chronologically but by frequency of number dialed. I said, okay, that makes sense. Now this is a while ago, so it's not like instantaneous push button email. They said, hey, we need, we'll get the results. We'll FedEx them to you, so you'll have them tomorrow. And the other thing I did was I grabbed the guy's expense report and I looked at it and I thought, okay, well, who is it he's calling on? And I'm flipping through it, and I mean, he's a busy bee. He's going to all these going to all these different places and making these sales calls. And as I'm flipping through there, I see a company that was an old client of mine from like 10 years ago. And I know the guy and I know the company because I had them as a client at one point. So I picked the phone up and I called the company up. And he picks the phone up and goes, hey, Lee. And I said, hey, and the guy's name is Chuck. I said, hey, Chuck, how you been? Oh, blah, 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 blah. How are your kids and everything? And I said, Chuck, I need a favor from you. He said, hey, anything, man. What can I do for you? I said, okay, so hired a new sales guy and you had a meeting with him and I want to find out how he did. So is he representing my company well? Did you feel that his presentation was well prepared and mature? And I want to know if this guy can run around carrying my business card with my logo on it, and if I can feel comfortable about that. He goes, yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you. He goes, Lee, I constantly got salespeople calling on me, and I'm constantly meeting with them, because I manage all the vendors. And I said, yeah. He says, what's the guy's name? And I gave him the name, and he goes, yeah, it doesn't sound familiar. When was this? So I got the expense report right in front of me, and I said, well, I mean, it was a couple months ago, Chuck. It was, on this date, it was like, let's say it was April 20th. And I hear him, and I say April 20th, and there's this long pause. He goes, Lee, you might have a problem. And I said, why is that? He goes, well, I was at Disney World with my family for a week and a half, that entire week. And, he's saying he was here on a Thursday. And I can promise you, I not only do I not recall the name, but I never met with the guy. He said, sounds like you got a bigger problem than the guy just representing you well out here.
Right.
And it was like a punch in the gut. It's like, holy crap. Wow. So I hang the phone up, and and that was a Thursday. Actually it was a Thursday. It had to be a Thursday because what happens next was on a Friday. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to stew on this, and when I bump into him next, I'm going to question him about this and say, hey, you claim on your expense report here that you went and visited this guy, and I talked to the guy, and you guys never connected, and I got to tell you, I'm really curious to hear your explanation on that. So the next day, he does not come in the office, which is not uncommon in my business. Salespeople are constantly driving around, flying around. I not a big deal. And at that time, Alex, we had it was a big office, and we had a mailroom, and the mailroom was in the middle of the office floor, and it had a bunch of mail slots. And at the end of the day, it's probably 3:30ish on a Friday. I'm walking through the office, and I go past my mail slot, and there's a FedEx envelope there. And I yank the FedEx envelope out. Oh, this is my IT phone dump. So I'm standing there in the mailroom, and I rip it open, and I pull out, exactly as described, these 3 stapled packets with these call reports on them. And the one that's on the top is the one that lists the outgoing calls sorted by number most frequently dialed. And I look at it, and the number 2 most frequently dialed phone number had, in a 6-month period, had like 40 calls on it. The number 1 most frequently dialed call had like 900 and some phone calls on it. And I'm thinking, God, this guy is one persistent SOB. And immediately your mind and my mind go to the same thing. It's the guy's wife. He's keeping in touch with family. I knew for a fact he had a couple of teenagers. Teenagers are high maintenance. Mom and dad always want to talk about issues that pop up with teenagers. I completely get it as a father of a 25 and 22-year-old. I mean, I get it. And I look at it and I'm thinking, well, gosh, 900 calls to his wife. I mean, that's 2 calls a day, 7 days a week for 6 months, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, is that really? So I'm just kind of flipping through, and then all of a sudden I go back to that first page and I notice the number. It's a 313 area code. And I lived in Michigan at the time, and 313 is downtown Detroit. And we lived and worked in the suburbs, which was area codes 248 and 810. And I knew exactly where this guy lived because he was one of my salespeople, and I know where my salespeople lived, and he lived in West Bloomfield, which is very clearly not a 313 area code.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, well, gosh, he's making all these calls. These calls aren't to his wife, obviously. They aren't going home anyway, you know. And I just on a whim, I thought, God, I got to know who this is. And I'm standing in the mailroom, and I picked the phone up off the wall, and I just dialed the number. Blink, 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 blink. Bring the phone up here like this, and I'm listening, and I start to inhale to say, you know, hi, and I didn't even know what I was going to say. I'm sorry,
wrong number. Yeah.
Or so I just had to know. I had to know what the number
Right.
was, and it wasn't like today where you can do a reverse phone search on the internet or anything like that, right? So I get an automated greeting that quite literally made me react like this as I'm listening to. I was like, I'm alarmed. I'm disgusted. I'm like, oh my, you got to be kidding me. And I hung the phone up. I'm like, oh my God, I misdialed. I dialed the wrong number. I got to be more careful, you know. I picked the phone back up and I dialed the same number, and I get the exact same greeting. And I don't remember exactly what it was, but it went something like this. Hi, big boy. This is the Love Line. Here at the Love Line, just dial pound to get your mailbox number.
Oh, jeez.
So I hang the phone up and I go home. And now I'm thinking, okay, this guy and I are going to have a serious talk. And I don't know, why is he using the company phone to dial the Love Line? And I'm at home, and I'm making Friday night. I'm in the backyard, got the grill out. I'm grilling burgers and dogs for the family. And my next door neighbor at the time was a wonderful guy who's an FBI agent. And he used to come over whenever he saw me fire up the grill, or I saw him fire up his grill. We'd walk over and talk to each other and everything. So we're standing there in my backyard, you know, a couple of dads with our beers in our hands and doing the grill thing. And I said, Andy, I got a situation I want to run by you, and I want you to tell me what you think. So I told him the whole story. I got this guy, you know, blah, 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 blah. I called the guy, you know, da, 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 da. And Andy's just looking at me, shaking his head, smiling. And I said, what's so funny about this? He goes, man, you'd make an awful cop.
Although your sleuthing so far has been dead on. I knew you were going to say that, but actually you've been a great cop so far because you got these facts out. Continue the story. I disagree with your neighbor.
All right. Well, no, fair enough.
The conclusions might be a little off, but keep going.
And I'm kind of flummoxed at this point, and I look at him, and he's kind of giggling and everything, and he says, "You don't see what's going on here, do you?" And I said, "No, tell me." He goes, "Let me ask a couple questions." He said, your payroll is direct deposit into a bank account?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, your expense reports, when people put in expense reports, you cut them a paper check and make it out to them and hand it to them at the office, right? I said, yeah, that's exactly what we do. And he says, and on an expense report, if somebody drives to a location and meets with somebody and has lunch on the way back, you're reimbursing them for their meal and their mileage, right? I said, yeah, that's exactly how it works. Why does that matter? And he looks at me and he smiles and he shakes his head. He says, you really don't know what's going on? And I said, no. And he says, well, he's basically banging hookers on company time with company money. And I said, well, and my jaw hits the floor. You know, that's just not how I roll. And I'm old school. I've been married for 27 years. You know, and I look at him and he says, he goes, you need me to walk you through this? I said, yeah, I need you to walk me through this. He goes, that entire stack of expense reports, you've had the guy on board for 6 months. He hasn't gone to visit any of those companies. What he's doing is he is using the work phone because it's away from his home and he doesn't have to be worried about being overheard by his wife and his kids. And that phone bank, the love line, he goes, 90% of those things, they're all prostitution hookups. They're electronic mailboxes where Johns and prostitutes have electronic mailboxes, and it's how they communicate with each other without having to have each other's home phones. Or he says that way, you know, you don't have hookers calling married men on their cell phones or their home phones. That's how they communicate. He says, I mean, that's just known in law enforcement. And all of these prospect calls that this guy's making, he's not making them, but he's saying that he's making them, and he's filing for reimbursement through the company so that when the paper check shows up to him, he can go to a bank and cash it, and his wife never sees it and his family never sees it, and it doesn't go into the family checking account. And as soon as he explained it like that, it was crystal clear to me. And
it's diabolical.
It was just amazing to me that was all going on. So I thanked him, of course, profusely. I think I bought him a bottle of bourbon for helping me out. But so I ended up meeting with the guy, and after consulting with counsel, I was told, do not bring up him banging hookers. Do nothing other than to terminate him for filing a fraudulent expense report. Do that and that only. And I met with him, and I brought him in, and I let him know. I said, hey, sir, today's your last day. Your employment is terminated. Come to the conclusion that you've been filing fraudulent expense reports. I'm not going to share with you any of the detail as to how this was brought up, or I'm not going to answer any questions that you may have. Basically, I was reading from a script.
But I think we both know what we're talking about.
I didn't even do that. I didn't even do that. I didn't at first. I didn't at first.
Yeah.
It was, excuse the guy, 30-second meeting, walk him to the door,
right,
and tell him I was going to UPS his personal goods to his house, And he has a little mini breakdown in front of me. You can't do this. I've got a family. Most of the trauma that you face whenever you have to terminate an employee. And he started to sob a little bit, and you got to give me another chance, and I'm really sorry that I did this, and I basically told him, I said I remember saying this. I said this is a trust issue, and I'm really, really big on trust, really big. And even if the company were to permit me to keep you on the payroll, I don't think I'd do it, because you violated my trust and you fraudulently took money from the company under false pretenses. And so that's it. So we exited him, and he left. And I found out later that there were rumors of him claiming to be a sex addict. And this is after the termination and everything. And I ended up finding out later from outside counsel and my HR people in New York City that it's a darn good thing that he didn't say that to me prior to me terminating him, because evidently there have been cases that have been successfully argued that sex addiction is protected by the ADA, which means that all I could have done would be to have put him in rehab, and it would have gotten much muddier to terminate him at that point. But
yeah, but he would have had to bring the claim, and it would have been in public, and he probably would have been okay either way. I mean, does he want that out there? But I'm screwing with your story here, no pun intended. Any one of us as employers and entrepreneurs and business people that could have been anyone's story, honestly. And it probably in some ways is everyone's story, right? People tell you what you want to hear at the multiple interviews you have. They give you these pristine resumes. They have great references. And sometimes folks like that get through. You've paid them tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars in salary, and then they flame out in a big, embarrassing way. And you look back and maybe there's nothing you could have done. Maybe there's something you could have done. So I'm curious, as you think back, Lee, and you got a do-over, do you do anything differently?
I've picked up a couple of quick skills, I guess you'd say. Not even skills, techniques to help engineer some of that out. And the one thing I want to emphasize is that this was at the beginning of my P&L responsibility part of my career. This was the first stop that I had as a senior manager where I was responsible for, millions of dollars of revenue and millions of dollars of expenses and EBITDA at the end of the day to deliver to the shareholders. So part of this was just natural learning curve for a young, inexperienced manager like me to just intuitively trusted people on a handshake. And, I've learned not to do that. And this was a pretty clean example of a learning point in my life. What I found out later on is that when you are checking references and you have references that are being checked where I am the person providing the reference, there's a code that you can talk to people in that doesn't violate any legal requirements. So in a utopian environment, I could have looked at his references, and I don't even remember aggressively checking his references, candidly. I don't. But had I done it, I could not call a past employer and say, hey, does this guy bang hookers and use your money to do it? And had I even asked that, they can't answer that.
But you wouldn't have known at that point.
But I wouldn't have known.
Yeah. You would have asked even more vague questions.
But I could have said, the classic question that is legally appropriate to ask is, hey, can you confirm that this person worked for you? And we're thinking about hiring him. And I'm curious if you could share anything regarding his work performance or his behavior in the office place. What I have found is I know how I respond and I know what to listen for. So, for example, it's pretty cut and dry. If you're checking a reference on somebody and you call and that person says, I can confirm their dates of employment, and that's all. Mm-hmm. That's a code.
Yeah.
When people call me and they say, hey, this guy worked for you at this one point in time, I'd like to, this is a reference check. What can you tell me? And what I will say is, I can confirm that that individual worked here from date X to date Y. Oh, well, okay. Can, without violating any confidences, of course, can you share anything about his performance or his behavior at work? And my response is, no, I'm sorry, I can't do that.
Right.
And anybody that is calling on the other end that hears somebody say that, that is a legal way of not getting yourself in trouble.
Right.
And I've done it. I've done it and had it done to me. And let's say you and I work together and we worked together for 5 years, and then you left to go do something else. And somebody called and said, hey, calling about this Alex Gertzberg guy. Says right here on his resume that you two worked together from date X to date Y. Can you confirm that that is indeed the case? My response would be, hey, not only did he work here during those dates, I am still grieving the day that the guy left. He did so many wonderful things when he was here. Love the guy, high integrity, hard worker. He's smart. He knows the business. He was great at networking. He was, you'll get all of that positive information from a reference unsolicited. All you have to do is ask one or two open-ended questions and it should open the floodgate and you should get to, but if you get something short and brief and very uncompliant, then that's a red flag not to hire that person.
Yeah.
Because something happened and that person's aware of it, but they can't legally share it with you.
Right. So, I tend to break the rules here, and I'm a lawyer, and I should know better. But here's what I do, Lee. Particularly with more senior folks, I go to my LinkedIn and I find people that I know that in common with them, and I go down the list and I say, listen, this assumes that this person is unemployed. If he's currently unemployed, then I feel much safer doing this because I don't have to worry about costing him his current job.
Mhm.
So if he or she is unemployed, I will call a mutual connection. And if it's someone that I truly trust, right? And I say, listen, this is totally, totally confidential, but I'm talking to him or her. I got to know, gun to your head, you've got to tell me something negative about this person. You got to, what do they need to work on? If you had to change some behavior about this person, what would it be? And I swear to you, this goes nowhere. It's amazing how much people tell you. And it's amazing how many wrong hires I've avoided because of that. The other thing that I do is, I think I've shared this with you, Lee. I have no capacity for memory. If I don't write it down, it didn't happen, it doesn't exist. And so I am a slave to checklists. One reason I love checklists is because I can always improve on them. And we have a really robust hiring checklist here that grows and grows with every bad hire that we make. And we learn from it, and we add to it. And so background checks, we're big on assessments over here. You and I have talked about culture index.
Mhm.
We love it. We swear by culture index, but there's a lot of them out there. The reference checks. No, I rarely rely on the reference checks for the references they give me, because that just, I mean, who's gonna badmouth them if it's on their list,
Mhm.
you know? Although there is some, if it's somebody that's pretty high level and impactful and influential, then I will call them and talk to them just to validate it,
Mhm.
right? To make sure that they didn't just put this person on there just because they're important. You know,
Mhm.
if they put somebody on there that's like the mayor, but the mayor barely knows them, that's a red flag.
Yeah, that's a problem. Yep.
Yeah. But I mean, I tell me if this is true for you. I'm at the point now in my entrepreneurial journey where I would so much rather pass on questionable people or even on good people than let one more bad one inside the tent. You know, it's the cost of bringing in an underperforming employee, much less a someone who's going to spend your money on hookers. Man, I mean, all of that time that you could have spent with rock stars,
Oh, I know.
you know? So anyway,
For zero return, for negative return.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Um, so
It's an opportunity cost.
exactly. Totally. Totally.
Occupies your time and your money that could have been spent elsewhere to expand the company's
Yeah.
footprint. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and two, something you mentioned early on, I know well your leadership philosophy. It is very much a servant leadership philosophy. More on that also in that Best Podcast Ever interview where you and I talk a lot about servant leadership. So I do know that you, and I know this also from your employees. Drew Tewksbury is one of my favorite people on the planet. And he and I talk a lot about how your leadership style involves you being the quietest person in the room and letting everybody else do their thing and shine. And situations like this are no different, right? You're gonna give the person a lot of slack, a lot of rope, and let them shine, and you're not going to bother them that much, right? You don't want to be in their shit. But it makes it that much more important to make sure that that only the best, the absolute best people get inside your tent in the first place.
So we're doing a lot of hiring right now, and we've had I've spent a big chunk of 1Q21 doing interviews. I'm probably in the 3-digit range of probably north of 100 of them now. And
Wow.
it's an enormous time because we have several positions that are open at various levels, and we're growing. And I had a couple retirements, I had some promotions, and I had to replace so just a lot of open positions. And during this process, um, what I have been telling people is, I this is going to be a long process. You're not going to talk to me and get an offer letter tomorrow. You're going to talk to me, then you're going to talk to somebody else, then you're going to talk to 3 more people, then you're going to have a gang interview with 3-on-1 with you, and then maybe a follow-up interview or 2 after that. You're going to have to sit down with us at least 4, more likely 5 or 6 times before. And what I tell them, what I tell people is, I am going to subject you to this unapologetically. This is part of our process. And we load up our time and our energy on the front end of this to make sure that we get the right people on board. Going back 20 years ago, I didn't do this with this guy. And maybe had I done it with this guy, somebody in my circle that I trust would have said, fly the red flag. And candidly, Alex, I have an Achilles heel in that my radar for people like this is very poor. And I know that you know this, but I'm married to a social worker, and she has uncanny people radar. She can walk into a room and size somebody up in 20 minutes, and she is never wrong. 100% of the time. She's got a sixth sense for this stuff. And I tend to love everybody I meet. I sit down, I talk with them. If they want to talk about World War II history or guns or Harleys or, anything that, that I like, I tend to like them regardless of whether, and I can't tell you how many times, my wife has said, man, you don't get it. You don't see it. You need to avoid that person. They're bad people. And she's right all the time. So in many ways, this extensive interviewing process that we've put in place is a reflection of a weakness that I have to make sure that we've backstopped to catch these various things. And had I known that earlier in my career, I may have avoided this.
Folks, send your resumes to lstacey@McGowanInsurance.com. No sex addicts, ideally, if possible. But it will be a great place to work. And you've got a great company, Lee, and you're a great leader there. We are a client of yours, a happy client. And we refer a lot of folks to you because you guys are a really great company. So thank you.
You do, and I thank you for that. We appreciate it.
No, you guys are awesome. You guys are awesome. You got a great organization. Lee, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate it. You did not disappoint. I knew you wouldn't. Folks, if you go to the show notes, you'll see all the different places that you can find Lee and McGowan Insurance, and I encourage you to do that. You won't be disappointed. Lee, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Alex, my friend, I am honored to not only be invited to this, but to be invited back. So thank you for a second appearance. I'm flattered.
My pleasure. Thanks, Lee. Thanks, folks. We'll see you next time.
You bet. Cheers.
Bye. Thanks for listening to CEO Confidential. I hope you enjoyed it. Visit us at ceoconfidential.net and visit our sponsors, the business law firm of Gertzberg Licata and Cover My Six, a business solution that flushes out and repairs legal minefields before they blow up in court. We'll see you next time right here for another episode of CEO Confidential.